afternoon, good evening, good night. Tonight's special guest is Dr. Mark Goodacre of New Testament Studies.
How are you doing, my good sir?
I'm great, thanks. I can see you. Are you supposed to be able to see me too?
If you want.
Yeah.
I don't mind. That's fine by me. Let me see that. Here we go.
It's all up to you, but what makes you comfortable?
There we go. Yay?
Yep,
Sweet.
yay.
All right.
Real good.
So tell the audience a little bit about you.
What you want me? You want me to like? Sorry, say again. You want me to like kind of introduce myself?
Yeah, just
Sure.
introduce yourself. Let the audience know who you are.
Okay, so my name is Mark Goodacre. I am a professor of religious. Can't say it. It's the only word I stammer over is the word religion and religious studies. So I'm a professor of religious studies at Duke University in North Carolina, USA. And my main area of interest is the Gospels, and I would say like Christian origins generally. Like I'm really interested in like, not just like the canonical Gospels, but the Gospels generally. I've written about the Gospel of Thomas and hypostasis of the archons, the Gospel of Mary, and like stuff like that. And I have a subsidiary interest in Jesus films. Does that kind of like at least give like a really quick précis of what my interest is?
Short, sweet, and to the point. Tonight we'll be discussing Jesus in cinema.
Okay, that sounds good to me. It's one of my favorite topics.
Sweet. I mean, the one that always comes to me the most would be obviously the Passion of the Christ.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, it really took me a while to appreciate how good the film is in many ways, and some of the creative choices that was made. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I've always felt slightly guilty about the fact that I love certain aspects of the Passion of the Christ film. In many respects, the film is kind of awful. There's loads of it. There's like just you really shouldn't like. It is anti-Jewish, it is anti-Semitic, but at the same time, it's a kind of amazing piece of cinema. It really is. It's an incredible piece of cinema. I'll give you an actual reminiscence. I think my third viewing, I think it's my third viewing, I went to see it in a cinema in Wolverhampton in England. And I was going to be on a panel that was discussing it. And the person sitting next to me was also on the panel. And she was like pre-programmed to hate it, as we all are, because like, as biblical scholars, we don't want to, kind of like play into that. But the thing is, she was like freaked out by the fact that I was watching the film and I got tears streamed down my face because the film's visceral. The film is like, even if you think it's like the worst thing you've ever seen, it's like there's an emotional impact. I actually see that. I actually feel like there's an emotional impact. I'm not proud of that, but that's just how it is. Like, I might be a biblical scholar, but I'm also a human being, and actually I kind of love watching the film and just letting the emotions hit me. And by the way, I think it's awful, but yeah, carry on.
Okay, so I'm just curious. People always saw as like a lot of people's main complaint is that it's anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, but I never got
Right.
that when I see it, since the
Mhm.
Romans were the ones that were killing Jesus and enjoying it.
Right. I think.
I would,
Okay. Sorry, carry on.
I mean, what I would assume would be like the anti-Semitic part would be like if there's any notion of like the blood libel sort of thing that's in there.
Mhm. Right. So, okay. So I think the thing is, I think the film has got like some really terrible decisions that it makes. So it does do the blood libel thing from Matthew 27, which is the famous thing of his blood will be on us and on our children. The way that Mel Gibson dealt with that is that he put it in the Aramaic, but he didn't put it in the subtitles. Well, the thing is, it's really difficult to do this without like thinking about the broader issues around the film. Maya Morgenstern, who played Mary, she's Jewish. Like, so Mel Gibson actually casted a Jewish woman, like when she was doing it, when he was doing it. There are other issues around the same thing. I think if you look at the Passion of the Christ alongside the source material, quite often it actually is not as appalling as the source material. Having said all of that, I still think I cannot believe that Mel Gibson and Benedict Fitzgerald, who was the co-writer on the screenplay, I can't believe they did what they did. So I'm not going to give them any free pass on this. I think that there are huge problems with this film. I really do, in spite of the fact that it's got visceral, like kind of like issues where you watch it and you go, "Oh my goodness, this is so crazy."
And another thing that bothered me about it was that they were careful to make the language authentic, but they
Uh huh.
still cast mostly white people.
Do you know what? It's so stressful. So I teach a course on Jesus in film, and one of the things that I do in my course on Jesus in film is like I basically say, look, every single one of these films is just like, kind of white Jesus, white followers, and all the rest of it. I mean, we've just got that wherever you look. And then you go to Passion of the Christ, it's exactly the same. It really is. And yet at the same time, you you actually see certain things where they are conscious of the ethnic issues. I mean, it's there in the film. There's some of the ethnic issues are key, but at the same time, everybody you see is white. It really, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's why some of my favorite ones are Risen and the Gospel of series on Netflix.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like, so when I do my, I teach a course at Duke called Jesus in Film, and I love the fact that we have a ton of different films that we can look at, and loads and loads of those films. Well, not yeah, loads of those films. They are not just like kind of white Jesus. They're not. I mean, like, so let's take like one like The Son of Man, which is like this amazing South African film. It's just like the most beautiful piece of cinema, and there's lots of like we've got at least three beautiful pieces of Indian cinema where you're looking at Jesus, that there's not the white Jesus. So like Mel Gibson had the choice. He had the choice. He could have cast somebody who was not an American. He could have done that. He didn't do it. So there is an issue there, and let's not shy away from that.
But aesthetically, my favorite Jesus movie was the 1999 one, and artistically, my favorite one is Passion of the Christ and Ben-Hur.
When you
If
say the
Ben-Hur counts as a
1990,
Jesus film.
when you say the 1999 one, you mean like the when
Yeah, in terms of his personality, making him more relatable, like
okay,
an actual
okay.
person that he was.
Cisco is Jesus, that one?
Yeah, Jeremy Sisko. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. So in my Jesus course, we watched that, and one of the funnest things about that is that they in the US, it's like so weird. In the US, they didn't show the ending that they actually filmed, which has Cisco in Malta in like present day garb with his jeans and his t-shirt and all the followers, joining him. And like the US version of that, they didn't show that, and it's awesome. It's brilliant.
Yeah, like in the US one, we just got the end with "I Need You" by Leanna Rhymes.
Uh huh. Well, also, one of the things that's is kind of incredible about that is that you've got Gary Oldman playing Pontius Pilate.
Yeah.
And like Gary Oldman has got to be one of the great actors of our time.
Mm-hmm.
And what's he doing playing Pilate in this thing? I mean, like he's
I don't know.
like
He's good. He's good at playing the asshole.
he really is. He's fabulous. Like he just sort of like he owns that role. He really does. Yeah. And no one knows that film. I love the fact you brought that up because I would say no one knows. And of course, this is one of the things about the Jesus films. No,
Mhm.
I would say like most people just don't know them. Like most people do not know these films at all. But like when you say that, I mean, I know it because I've watched it multiple times, but lots of people do not know the Jesus film from 1999. It's great. It even begins with, the Jesus character is in a romantic relationship with Mary, and he has to like kind of step away from that. I mean, like, wow, how did they do that?
And to be clear, this is the Mary, the brother of Lazarus, sister of
That's right.
Lazarus.
That's right. It's not Mary Magdalene. It's like Mary after Mary and Martha. Yeah.
Yeah, but another thing that bothered me about it was that Mary Magdalene is portrayed as a prostitute when we know she wasn't.
I know, and like I think so. For me, one of the great steps forward that's happened over the years has been that the idea that Mary Magdalene is a sex worker in New Testament scholarship, that's gone. That's just completely gone. There is no grounds for that whatsoever. And I would say for many, many years, New Testament, not New Testament, like the films, like struggle to catch up with that. But then we get there. And so you look at the BBC HBO Passion, Mary Magdalene is not a sex worker. You look at even the Bible, which is like a very, very traditional History Channel retelling of the thing. She is not a sex worker. And I think it's fantastic that there's just little bits of New Testament scholarship that have actually impacted Jesus films. It's not been like, it's not been across the board like successful, but there's been that's been something that's been really, really good, like in certain films.
And one more thing I like about the 1999 is that the way Satan was portrayed as this rich looking man and this beautiful woman who are both trying to tempt him in the desert. And when
They
before
switch,
he's
don't
still,
they? Like, yeah, they switch because like it starts off like he's some like kind of like he looks like some CEO of some dodgy company, and then he switches to a woman. No, that's great. I agree. Yeah, it's
yeah,
really
and
underrated. I love the fact you bring this up. That film is really underrated. Like people don't talk about it. I think it's
yeah,
great. I
and
was
oh, you go ahead.
I was going to say, like when that came out, it's like um, in the millennium. I was living in England at the time, and we got it on British TV. And I remember watching on British TV and thinking, this is great. This is like doing so many things that we've not seen before, right? I mean, like
Hmm.
really unusual. But I think I think it'd be fair to say it's almost completely forgotten today. I mean, I know it, you know it, but most people just do not know that, and it's a great piece of TV. The
And
crucifix.
yeah, and I was gonna say the part near the when he before he's about to get crucified, that he shows him visions of the future and people killing in
Hmm.
his name and all
Yeah,
this.
that is very impressive. I love that, and also I found that the crucifixion scene is also incredibly moving because you've always got the thing where how do you depict Jesus's crucifixion? Like lots of the time, when people depict the crucifixion, they go with a sort of almost Johannine Jesus where he's completely serene. There's a sort of everything is okay. We will, you know, and actually, when you watch that film, Cisco really, it's actually upsetting. I mean, when I watch it, like when he's watching the so when you see him being actually crucified, we see the nails being knocked in.
Yeah,
I actually find it very emotional. I find it very like tear-jerkingly emotional because they actually make it look like what it would look for a guy to be being crucified. And I think that's one of the first films that does that, like where you actually go, "Oh my goodness, I can't cope." That's just like so stressful.
yeah. It's all the more all the better when you actually see it how it really did experience it, because trying to make it look
Exactly,
serene and all that would kind of take away from what he actually went through.
exactly. And it's like, and Cisco, I think part of it is that you actually do have in that film like a couple of actors who have got real quality. Cisco's one, obviously, and Gary Oldman's one as well. But Cisco knocks it out of the park. I think it's one of the great underrated Jesus films. And when I watch the crucifixion scene, I actually find it. I got personally. I think it's one of the most moving scenes of any Jesus film with the crucifixion. I can watch Greatest Story Ever Told from 1964. I will not even shed a tear. I'll look at it. I go, okay, Jesus being crucified. Boom, that's it. And that's how I am with a lot of the Jesus films. Not with that one. So I appreciate you
And
bringing that up. And most people don't know that. I wasn't even expecting you to bring that up today, but that's
yeah,
great that you
we'll
did.
bring it up. We can bring it up now or later if you
Yeah,
want.
no, it's fine.
I was gonna talk about the Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah.
It was
Uh,
the what were we saying, Brass?
yeah, well, I was just going to bring up the whole notion that like this is not just a general issue with when it comes to Jesus films, but more any book adaptation. It's that it's very hard to translate a book into a movie because with books are inherently more imaginative, where
Right.
you can imagine things in multiple different ways, whereas when it comes to a movie, you're just you get what you get,
That's
and
right. Exactly.
and so that's an inherent sort of difficulty that comes with any adaptation. So that's sort of what I think can be disconnected when it comes to Jesus movies.
I so agree. I mean, the thing about Last Temptation of the Christ is such a brilliant piece of work in all sorts of ways. And I mean, I would go back. So I teach a course on Jesus in film, and I'll go back and I'll watch it, rewatch it, and rewatch it, and rewatch it. It's got a lot of rewatch value. I mean, like, so one of the ways of like judging, like, how much do you like this thing is like, would you go back and rewatch it? Okay, loads of Last Temptation of Christ is like heavy going. Some of it is very boring. Some of it is really boring. Like Scorsese, like, I don't know what he's playing at. There's certain points where it's like, come on, Having said that, I think at its best, it's kind of brilliant because it does engage the emotions. Again, it engages the emotions. Absolutely.
Yeah, and since it's from the director of Goodfellas and Casino, it's going to be epic.
He's a genius. He's a genius. And so, like, you get everything that's great about Scorsese and everything that's problematic about him as well. I mean, like, personally, when you have the thing where Jesus like pulls out a literal heart and gives it to them, I don't quite do that. I don't quite go with that.
I think that was sort of a vision.
I still struggle with that a little bit. I still, it's just sort of, I know it's a vision, but I think sometimes there's a sort of weirdly literalistic thing. It's the same thing with when you get to in Last Temptation of the Christ, you get the thing with the Eucharist, and you get like a really over literalistic where Jesus is giving everybody his wine/blood, and then you see them like looking at it and they're thinking, oh, the wine actually is blood. That's too much for me. That's just too much. Just don't do that. Just like allude to it, sit back from it. You don't need to actually kind of like hit you in the face with it. But maybe that's just me. But I'm not Catholic, so maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just like my background. But sometimes Scorsese to me just like he hits you in the face too much. He's like kind of going look at this, and actually sometimes I don't need that. I want a bit more subtlety, but it could just be me. And to be fair, I do love Last Temptation of the Christ. I think I go back to it over and over and over again, and there's all sorts of things I love about it.
Just about the only thing that turned me off of it was the aesthetics of it. Like Holy Land didn't look like that at that time or now.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's right. Agreed.
As with most Bible movies in general, they're all shot in Morocco. Like, why is it almost always Morocco?
Do you know what? One time I forget when it was. It's probably like 20 years ago. I actually went out to Morocco to Ouarzazate, because I was like, okay, so people like me occasionally will get to be in Bible documentaries, which is great. It's fine. We don't get paid for it. We get a beer and a sandwich, but we don't. But the thing is, every now and then, instead of going to New York or London to film it, they'll actually take us to Morocco. So one time I went out to Morocco and I actually witnessed all of the places that they did Last Temptation of the Christ, and it was absolutely fantastic. Like when you actually see it, like you're looking at it thinking, I can see why this works as a cipher or a stand-in for first century Israel. But at the same time, there's part of you that just thinks, can you do it without that? I mean, like, because ultimately you look at it and like, I this might just be like a kind of a nerd perspective, but whenever I see it, and not just Last Temptation of the Christ, this is like in multiple Jesus films. You even go to Jesus from Nazareth, like the great Zeffirelli film. Much of that is Tunisia. Mm-hmm. Some of it's Morocco, some of it's Tunisia. Life of Brian, which I adore. much of it is the same set as Jesus of Nazareth, you know. And you look at it and you're thinking, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is nerd perspective, but you look at it and you think, that's not Israel.
Obviously.
that's like North Africa, you know. So that is it's an issue. It's an issue, you know. But the thing is, maybe it's just an issue for the nerds. I don't know. What do you think? What do you think?
It is. It sort of bothers me, but that's what I like about Ben-Hur and the Jesus film. It shows the Holy Land as authentic as it was.
Oh my goodness, yeah, absolutely. And every now
I
and
like
then,
that. I mean, I like that thing where they try to be accurate as you possibly can be, while also being, you know, because there is a difficulty when you're doing films like that about history in general, because on one hand, you want to be like, if you want to be authentic to the story, you have to try to get the set, like the environment right. But on the other hand, there are plenty of environmental facts that would not lend it to be aesthetically pleasing.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
So and you sort of trade off between the two.
Well, one of the, I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but one of the great videos, like I just think this is like really awesome, is when Pier Paolo Pasolini, when he was scouting for locations, and before he settled on Spain to do the Gospel according to St. Matthew, he went to the Holy Land and he was trying to work out, could I film here? Could I film here? And he basically worked out he couldn't do his Jesus film in Israel. And like most people don't, you know, including Pasolini. And like, you know, you fast forward like 10 years to Jesus Christ Superstar, and they did locate all the action in Israel, but
not in the right parts.
But the reason why they could do it is because they don't care about how Israel actually looks, because they're all going to turn up in their jeans and t-shirts. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, so it's the hardest thing to do right. I don't think there's any perfect solution to it. Do you try and do it like you are absolutely being first century Israel, or do you just go, oh, and then just do like, you know, Jesus Christ Superstar did, and say, okay, we'll do modern Israel?
Yeah, and Jesus Christ Superstar, they set it up like any other play, but they just didn't care about the costumes at all. Like, you even got Roman soldiers. You even got the Roman soldiers in pink old tank tops and leather pants. Like, what was that all about?
Did not care at all. They did not care. And like, what the hell are those stupid hats that the high priests have got? Oh no, that's like, but you know, I adore Jesus Christ Superstar, but seriously, some of their decisions, like especially the hats.
Jesus Christ Superstar.
Look, to be fair, one of the things that is like kind of like, if it's anything worse than the hats in Jesus Christ Superstar, is the hats in Pasolini's Gospel according to St. Matthew, which look like waste paper baskets. Like, what the hell are they? Like these stupid waste paper baskets on their heads, you know. So yeah. So actually, Jesus Christ Superstar is not even the worst.
And wasn't that in the Gospel according to Matthew by supposed to be written by a non-believer or directed by a non-believer?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, the guy was a communist. The guy was an atheist. I'm like, he was an atheist communist. I'm like, and loads of people talk about it like it's like the best film ever. To be fair, I've got such a love-hate relationship with Pasolini's Gospel according to St. Matthew. When I show it to my students, I would say that 9 times out of 10 they hate it. They just really struggle with it. They feel it's like dated, it's weird, and all the rest of it. I'm not 100% with them on that, but I do think it's problematic. It's nowhere near as great as loads of scholars claim that it is. But at the same time, there are certain moments that is completely sublime, like the healing of the leper, or we don't say the leper anymore, the man with leprosy. The healing with the man with leprosy is just like, it's just incredibly beautiful. And you have this incredible like background thing with Bach playing. Oh, there are certain respects in which it's just like a beautiful piece of work. So I don't know. It's so strange. Like most scholars just love Pasolini, like, or they claim they love Pasolini. I find that my undergrad students generally hate it. They generally, well, hate is maybe a strong word, but they generally struggle with it. They love Jesus Christ Superstar, and they can cope with Jesus of Nazareth, but they struggle with Pasolini. You know, they really do.
Ironically, also Sigart, the scientist, used to be a communist, but he watched it, and then that was one of the stepping stones of becoming a believer.
Is that right? Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Like that was like it was like nothing he ever seen before.
A lot of people think it's a really spiritual film.
I wouldn't go that far, but
Same. But loads of people, they watch it and they get like this kind of like some kind of like spiritual moving experience. I had one student, I remember some years ago, I had a student that watched it and it caused like an existential crisis for her. She was a Christian who had a particular idea of what Jesus was like, and she watched it, and I remember afterwards, I said, "How do you like it?" She said, "I hated it." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "That was nothing like my vision of what Jesus is like." And
yeah.
I actually, and I love the fact, obviously it's like, for her it was traumatic, but I love the fact that she was able to articulate it in that way, because basically this is what happens when you watch Jesus films. Sometimes you look at it and people are really, really challenged because they look at it and they go, "That is nothing like my Jesus. Nothing like my Jesus." And I think that's one of the reasons I love doing the Jesus film thing, because I'll watch, you know, every single Jesus film. And like sometimes I'm like, "Yeah, that's all that." And sometimes I'm like, "Oh, not so much so," you know, but I'm always, "Oh gosh, you know, give me some more of that. Show me some more. Show me some more." And like that's why I like it, because like our imaginations are, you know, we're not, especially when it comes to the ancient world, we're not very good at imagining the ancient world. But you know, if you get a really good Jesus film, sometimes it actually helps you to conceptualize what the ancient world's like. So yeah, that's where I am on it. That's where I am on it.
And especially in the greatest story ever told, where they shot it in the American Southwest.
I know.
Like it looks and feels like a Western.
But how awesome was that? Because it looks great.
It was unique, but it was nothing like Israel.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And the thing is, like, the greatest story ever told, it gets loads and loads of critics, but I think the end of Act One, and it was literal Act One when you went to the cinema, because they actually did do an interval in between. The end of Act One, I think, is absolutely gorgeous cinema. You've got Lazarus is raised, and the way they've done the landscape, and then you have the whole thing of he makes the blind see, the lame walk, and the dead are raised to life, and you get Handel's Hallelujah chorus. I'm sorry, I know that the film's good as critics, but you go to the end of Act One, I think it's a beautiful piece of cinema. It's absolutely gorgeous. It really is. So, you know, anyway, that's just me. If you want the received opinion is the film's awful, boring, blah, blah, blah. Actually, watch the end of Act One. It's fantastic. It's the most beautiful piece of cinema. It really is. And honestly, I've never seen it in the cinema. I've only watched it on TV, and I've got my, you know, I'm an obsessive. I've got my Blu-rays and everything.
Yeah.
But So I've watched it on my widescreen TV. I would love to see that thing in the cinema. I don't know why people were not blown away by the end of Act One. Well, I know a little bit why, because a lot of the rest of it is quite boring. But end of Act One, greatest story ever told. Fantastic, absolutely gorgeous, beautiful piece of cinema. Really beautiful piece of cinema. It looks exquisite. George Stevens was a genius. It's just that you if you're going to get people in 1964 into the cinema for 3 hours, that's the problem. But it's cool. It's great. I would actually, to be fair with you, I don't know how you are. I would actually, if I was given the choice between sitting down and watching The Greatest Story Ever Told and The Gospel according to St. Matthew, I would watch Greatest Story Ever Told every single time. But if you talk to like biblical studies colleagues of mine, like my friend Bart Ehrman, like down the road at UNC Chapel Hill, they regard Pasolini as absolute, is all that. And I just don't. I struggle with it. I'll go to George Stevens. I really will. And what's worth? I'll go to King of Kings as well. I think
the King of Kings remake or the original.
Both. But just then, I'm thinking the 1960s. Yeah.
Yeah, because in the
that's with me. I might be weird.
No, you're obsessive compulsive like me.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, how would you say that the portrayal of Jesus has evolved over time in the history of cinema?
It's a great question. And slowly is the biggest answer. And of course, I would say there's two things. The number one thing is we're only still gradually getting to terms with the fact that we've always got a kind of white Western Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's really, it's just stupidly problematic. I mean,
if we're going to continue to see white Jesus, we may as well see more black and brown Jesus, or Mexican and Brazilian Jesus, Chinese and Japanese Jesus, or Native American Indian Jesus.
Yeah, I just want to, exactly. I would just love to see like kind of more diversity in the casting. That's the number one thing. I would say the number two thing for me is that when you look at things like, the kind of the great, I think of the three greats as The Greatest Story Ever Told, King of Kings, the 1960s one, and Jesus of Nazareth. There's still incredibly Western versions of Jesus.
Yeah.
They really are, and I would just love it if like there was more attempt to like diversify. And we've had some of that. We've had some of that in the history of the Jesus films, but not enough. Just not enough. Not enough. That's the way I look at it. I mean, in my in the course I teach on Jesus film, I've been trying to find like kind of counter examples, and I would say Son of Man, which is the great South African Jesus, love it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say there's a couple of really great Indian Jesus films, but there's really very few and far between. It's not that there's great films out there we're not looking at. It's just that there aren't many of them.
Well, there's an anime that shows Japanese Jesus, like him and the Buddha are reincarnated in the modern day and are his roommates in Tokyo.
Right? I don't know that. You'll have to
It's called
email me that.
It's called Saint Young Men.
Okay, you have to email that.
There also is a short anime about his crucifixion, but they just do voiceovers from the Jesus film into it.
Okay, great. And I would say one of the things that The Miracle Maker, which goes back to 1990.
Oh yeah, I like that one.
I mean, I love that. My students kind of hate it because they find the whole like claymation animation thing, to them it's quite dated because it's like It's like it's just like a little bit too. But one of the things I like about that, you've got Ray Fiennes doing Jesus's voice, but the way that they depicted Jesus was as a person of color. So I actually really appreciated that. I think that's a beautiful piece of work. Murray Watts, fantastic screenplay. I actually was very lucky in the year 2000. I was living in Birmingham in England at the time, and I went to one of the premieres of the film, and Murray Watts was doing an interview afterwards, and I was bowled away by it. I still can't quite believe why people don't think it's one of the best things ever, because I love it. And the idea that you're telling it through this, through Jairus's daughter, they call her Tamar or Tamar, love it. That's like a beautiful piece of film. I just don't know why people don't love that. And to be fair, go for it, sorry.
To be fair, what?
I was going to say, like, that's just like all Jesus film stuff. Like, people just don't know some of the best stuff. Like, people just, and even if they did know it, they've forgotten it. So, but yeah, I think that the character of Tamar in that film, absolutely beautiful. And the way that they pull her into the Road to Emmaus story, just absolutely. I think it's really special. I'd put that in my top 10.
Yeah, I always like. Yeah, it's more interesting seeing the Jesus story through the people who were there. Like
it really is.
Like the anime shows that the thief that was crucified on the cross next to him. It shows his flashbacks to when he was a thief and a murderer.
Oh, what's that? Tell me more.
The anime.
Okay. I don't know that.
I don't know what it's forgot what it's called. I think it's just Jesus. But then there's there's also Barabbas, which shows it through his perspective.
My Barabbas, fabulous, fantastic film. It's like a non-comedy version. So you've got Hamlet, Shakespeare with Hamlet, and then you've got Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which is like the kind of like hilarious version of what would you hear if you heard, what. That's what Barabbas is like. But it works. It so works. Yeah. I agree. Barabbas is great. It's a work of genius, I think.
That and the remake in 2012 with what was the name?
I know what you're talking about, but we're not calling it to mind at the moment.
Billy Zane.
Okay. Yeah.
Where it portrays him as a non-believer who just doesn't care about life at all. Right. He has a sort of nihilistic view, and then he comes to realize that Jesus was who he says he was, and spoiler alert, dies for him.
Do you think though that so one of the things that I find fascinating about all of these is, do you think that we still haven't actually got to the point where someone will come up with like a really, really great idea, for doing this story, like from an outsider perspective, or whatever it is. Like, I mean, there are so many possibilities, and yet most of the films that we've got are pretty conservative. Like, we've talked about some like slightly unusual ones, like The Miracle Maker and so on, and Barabbas. But do you feel like there's still the chance that we could get something that's really quite unusual?
I don't know. Hollywood's not in a good spot these days, but
what I've always found interesting is like, what if they had like I don't know if they've done this before, but what about like a Mormon Jesus movie?
They did. I saw that one.
They've done it. It's terrible.
They switch back and forth between him and this Native American was living 2,000 years later at the same time, even though North America didn't look like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen
the theory is fine. I would just love to see someone do it really well. I don't know about you, I still want the Paul Verhoeven Jesus film. Like, he's like, for the best part of 30 years wanted to make a Jesus film. You know, the guy that did Basic Instinct and RoboCop and all of that. And he was like present with the Jesus seminar and all of this. And he is like completely, he's read everything and he wants to do a Jesus film and he still hasn't done it. I just want the Paul Verhoeven Jesus film. I like, maybe it'd be terrible, but you know, I mean, like I always love these things. You know, even the rubbish ones. I'll give you an example of where I think one of the less strong Jesus films was still fun. So the Killing Jesus project. It was basically that Fox TV, Bill O'Reilly. Is it Bill O'Reilly? Bill O'Reilly. He.
Oh, fuck it. Let's do it live.
Yeah, I know. So he. I think much of that film, Killing Jesus, is kind of terrible, but
authentic.
Yeah, and there's a moment. Why I don't write any of them off. Well, one or two I do, but anyway, I can tell you one I do write off. But anyway, but the reason I like Killing Jesus is there's an absolutely fantastic. Also, is because Kelsey Grammer plays Herod. Anyway, sorry, let me keep interrupting myself. There's a moment where the disciples are all sitting around and they're talking about how they've, like, you know, it's the whole Gospels thing, tax collectors and sinners. And Matthew is sitting there and he's like getting really depressed about how everyone's giving him a hard time. And then Mary Magdalene says, you should hear some of the things they say about me. And I don't care for any of that film overall, or not much of it. That moment is absolutely sublime because the idea, in that second, you leave the moment of the film. You leave the actual narrative, and 2,000 years worth of abuse about Mary Magdalene is in her mouth. You should hear some of the things they say about me. Absolutely loved it. Even though I don't like that film overall,
I think
that moment I was like, go for it. I was like, I kind of like, Mary Magdalene, yay, go for it. Seriously, that's how I was like, you know. And so even the ones that I don't like, there's always something just like that completely, for me, reignites, whether it's the gospel story or the interpretation, and that just did it. I loved it.
And there's one Jesus film where they went out of their way to stress that Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute. Is the title of the same name as Mary Magdalene, but I didn't like it. It was
absolutely
terrible.
Well, no, it's quite boring. You mean the full Mary Magdalene? It's got
Joaquin
Phoenix and stuff. Do you know what? It is quite boring, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know. I liked her though. I mean, the thing is, I liked her. It's so difficult because I'm kind of preconditioned to want to like that film. But yeah, I agree. It's quite boring.
Yeah, like half the disciples are white and the other half are black. Like, why not just not just have them as Middle Eastern as they were?
Well, I don't even mind about that too much, except that the film was just like really boring. I just like, you know, kind of.
Yeah, it was.
You know, kind of like, is it what's the guy's called? Is it Joaquin? Is it?
Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix.
It is. It just. Ooh, yeah, it's hard work, you know. I mean, that film was interesting because it didn't get the cinema release it should have had because of the whole thing around Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah,
he was. I think if I remember rightly, he was one of the producers, and that's one of the reasons it didn't get the full release. But yeah, I don't know. I don't mind. It's not terrible, that film.
No, it's just boring.
It's not great. Yeah, you're right.
You know who I would love to see do a Jesus movie? Michael.
Who?
Michael Bay. You know, from Transformers.
Be seeing explosions after he rises out of the tomb.
I would just love to see just how many explosions he could find out how to get into a Jesus movie.
Well, you know, so you know when you got History Channel had their massive success with the Bible, like really unexpected success because it's very low budget. I was one of the consultants on the thing, like one of like multiple consultants, and they didn't expect it to do so well. And then they commissioned their sequel, and the sequel was called, what was it called? Like AD. He
does the same thing that Zeffirelli did. And in his trilogy, it was Moses the Lawgiver, then Jesus of Nazareth, 77, and then AD.
Right, and the thing is, you have like the resurrection done. I think it's one of the worst depictions of the resurrection I've ever seen, because like they decided they were going to do the whole thing with the special effects and everything, and you've got Jesus descending down, and it was just absolutely awful. Like the thing is, what they did was they did the very thing the Gospels don't want to do. The Gospels don't really want to tell you what happened on the morning at 6 a.m. or whenever you want to depict it. They'll tell you what happened afterwards. What happened afterwards is the women turn up at the tomb, the stones already rolled away. Jesus is not there, you know, he is not here, he has, you know, and the thing is, to try and depict it is what you're doing, like the Gospel of Peter did. And every time that you actually try and depict that stuff, it just doesn't, it's just not convincing. It just becomes like kind of stupid. Like if you try and actually depict it, the way to do it is stand right back, like do the thing that the Gospels are doing, which is here's what happened afterwards, you know. So yeah, I think AD was kind of like a disaster on that front. Like,
not like near the end of Risen, where he's just going up like a shooting star and that's it.
Oh my! Okay. Risen is a really good analogy. The first like half an hour, absolutely brilliant film.
Yeah, well, like a CSI or a Law and Order in Jerusalem.
And yeah, and then it just like kind of like the moment when they actually find out Jesus is actually knocking about with his disciples, it's like, no, this is not where this film was going. Like, you know, yeah, and it doesn't correspond to anything. There's any of the early Christian sources. Yeah, Risen is a really interesting case actually, in how not to do that stuff. I think personally, you know.
Yeah, and it shows through the perspective of a Roman, like the robe.
Yeah, it just doesn't work. I mean, and it nearly works. It's nearly brilliant. Honestly, I think the first. I remember. I know, right? Like all these things. I've got the DVDs and the Blu-rays and all that. I watched that thing, and I thought first half an hour, I thought, this is it. And then, oh my goodness, what's happened? Like, you know, it takes a left turn. Yeah, so, you know.
Yeah, and I've noticed a trend that's been going on with a lot of Jesus movies is that there are many of them that they focus on doing a version of just one book of the New Testament. Like, you'll have a Jesus movie that it's like the book of John, or the New Testament like the book of Luke.
Yeah.
What I find funny is like I never really see a movie that's because it's always either John or Luke that they do.
Yeah,
but I've never seen one actually do it from Mark.
No, right, and I think that's a mistake, because like it's obvious why they go to Luke and John, just because there's like so much more material there, you know, and and Mark is just like so much more mysterious. But I would actually love it to see a Jesus film where they do the story like Mark does it, because Mark presents it as a mystery. It's brilliant. Mark is like, I know that like I'm a New Testament scholar, so obviously, you know, I'm kind of like, you know, avant-garde and on the kind of liberal side of things. But seriously, you read Mark's gospel and you get to the end of it, and he just like sets up the mystery. That's really what he does. He basically says the women arrive at the tomb. They were worried about how they were going to kind of roll the stone away because they want to anoint Jesus's body. And then they get there, the stone's already rolled away. There's some random person that Mark just calls a young man, and they, kind of go in and they look at the thing, and he says, "Here's where he was. Here's where," and it's a brilliant bit of literary artifice. Mark's gospel just ends and it makes you think, "Oh my goodness, what's happened?" We have not got a Jesus film that does it like Mark's gospel does. The closest you get, I honestly think the closest you get is Jesus Christ Superstar. Because Jesus Christ Superstar, you do actually get Jesus dying and being buried. The only thing that I think is problematic about it is it doesn't do the mystery at the end. There's no reason it should do. There's no reason it should do. Like in the film, they get on the coach and they head off. But if you read Mark's gospel, the end of Mark's gospel, it's like the most fantastic mystery that's set up, and the answer to the mystery is obvious. I'm not like kind of being like weird. I think that the author of Mark's gospel thinks that the solution to Mark's gospel is Jesus has risen from the dead. That's what he thinks, but he's not going to state it in so many terms. He's just going to go, the women turned up, the tomb's empty, work it out. Well, okay, we've worked it out. Jesus is risen from the dead. But I still think it's brilliant the way he does it, because unlike Matthew, Luke, and John, you don't have an actual encounter with the risen Jesus, and we don't have a Jesus film that does that. Well, you've got the Mark's Gospel thingy, the Lumo project, which is fine, which is great, and I don't want to criticize it. It's fine, but I don't mean not a mainstream. You're not got a mainstream one where you're looking at that and go, oh, and I still think you could do that. Like maybe Paul Verhoeven would do it that way. I don't know.
Like ever since they started doing Jesus movies, they just started compressing the four gospels.
That's right. You're always going to harmonize. They're always going to do that. And I don't criticize them for that. That's just like, the way things are. But, heck, I mean, you're just going to have that. You're just going to have that. But I personally love it when you get a Jesus film that finds some nuance in the gospels that, that they can like kind of run with.
I also like the ones that were getting started in Hollywood, like Intolerance and the original King of Kings, which was the first one shown at the Chinese Grauman Theater.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. There's so much scope, even still. I mean, like it's it's an area where we've got tons and tons and tons in the canon. I don't think we've actually yet really found like people celebrate Pasolini. I personally love Zeffirelli's Jesus of Nazareth, even though it's very traditional and a lot of people don't like it. But I still think we've got like so much scope for something different. I really do. I really do. I think that it just needs somebody like with a vision, and it will happen. It will happen at some point.
We got something like that with Jesus of Montreal, where this actor,
fabulous film,
where this actor is playing a more scholarly Jesus interpretation,
right.
and he keeps finding parallels with Jesus in his own life.
I love Jesus of Montreal, but you know what? It's really strange because when I show it to my students, we do it as one of our films in my Jesus and Film course. They so struggle with the scene, which is like the cleansing of the temple scene, where Jesus basically, or the Daniel, he basically gets quite violent with the people who are basically trying to turn this into like kind of a porn thing where they ask her to, undress. My students so get upset with where he strikes the woman who is they actually can't, after that point, they have no sympathy with him. And I found that fascinating because I don't know whether the implied viewer is supposed to be sympathetic or not, but as soon as Jesus hits, it's not Jesus, sorry, Daniel, who is the sort of Jesus character, when he hits the woman, like my students, like they're like done with it, which is interesting, I mean, like, and that's like an authentic reaction to it. So
yeah, but like, what do they think the cleansing of the temple looked like? Like he had this he was like driving people out with a whip and everything. Like he was just so pissed off that they would just desecrate God's house like that.
Yeah. I personally think that is a very, very powerful scene. To me, that scene is the best scene in the whole film.
Yeah.
The only thing, it comes close when he does the temptation. Like he goes up and he's talking to the guy, and the guy is going, all of this I can give you, and you think, oh my goodness, this guy's the devil. And like when you're first watching it, the moment when you think, oh my goodness, it's the devil, I think it's a beautiful piece of work. I think it's a great film. I really do. I think it's a fantastic piece of work.
Yeah, and what I always liked was like recently. I remember like it was 2018, but they actually did a movie about like through the eyes of Paul the Apostle, where it was called like literally Paul the Apostle of Christ.
Okay.
Where they actually
I remember that. Yeah.
The guy that played Jesus in the 2004 Passion of the Christ movie plays Saint Luke.
That's right, Jim Caviezel.
Yeah, they had him play Saint Luke in it, and I thought it was interesting. Yeah. You often don't get that side of it with Paul and how his perspective going into it.
No, right. And to be fair, I'd love to see more of that. Yeah.
Oh, there was a miniseries in 1981 called Peter and Paul.
Yeah, with Anthony Hopkins as Paul. That's great. Do you know? There's okay. It's kind of hammy, a lot of it, but there's a moment when Peter and Paul are having a proper like kind of argument. You've got Anthony Hopkins as Paul. I actually get quite emotional when I watch it. Because Hopkins is such a brilliant actor, and he goes, if I remember rightly, it's something like you're like a reed, or no straw, like you're a straw, and like I actually occasionally I'll show that clip to my students, and I'll get emotional watching it, so yeah, occasionally you can get really, really great drama around the other stuff, like around Acts of the Apostles. No, I'm pleased you brought that up. I again, another thing almost completely forgotten, by other than people like us who love
and
this
there's
thing.
my favorite one about, well, it's not actually about Peter and Paul, they just appear in it, but it's Quo Vadis, about the persecution under the first Antichrist.
Yeah. Quo Vadis still, it's still iconic to me.
It's a masterpiece.
So, do you know what? I actually saw Quo Vadis for the first time, and I was probably, I don't know, I was a child, but I would guess 11, 12 years old. I actually think it was one of the things that made me want to study the New Testament, because I saw the film and I was just like, and I'll give another one alongside that. Ben-Hur is another one. I watched that film and I thought, I want to study the New Testament. And I'll give you a third one, The Robe. And The Robe,
yeah, The Robe
is I remember watching that film again as a child, because I grew up in a house where my dad absolutely loved all of those not just the biblical epics. He loved all of the classic. Forget all of those. We would watch all of the other epics, like But I think there was those. I mean, this is the genius of these things, and I think lots of people don't realize this. things like The Robe, Quo Vadis, Ben-Hur. There's a whole generation of scholars, students, like just people who are excited about history, who saw those things and thought, I actually want to read more about that. And that was me. That was me.
Yep, I mean, also
it's still me now. I actually, I want to read more. I always want to know. I want to know.
Like in the Ten Commandments is one of the best movies ever made. Like, I watched it the first time I saw it. I watched it like 5 other times.
Exactly. Yeah. And to be fair, for me as well. Okay, so Ten Commandments, I watched when I was very young. I would say around the same time I watched Jesus of Nazareth. So Jesus of Nazareth came out in 1977.
Mm-hmm.
And I was born in 1967. So I was 10 years old. So I can remember it very clearly. And it was event TV in our house. And I know that just from talking to other people around the time, like everybody sat down to watch it. Like it was on a Sunday night, and we all sat down to watch the I was going to say the stupid thing. I wouldn't say the stupid thing because I actually rather like it, And I think that's why Jesus films, not just Jesus films, but Bible films are so important. They're often an entry into your intrigue in the subject matter.
Yeah.
Like in my case, like I was 10 years old. What do I know about the Gospels? And I watched the thing. I can still remember vividly the first time I watched the healing of the Capernaum, the guy in the Capernaum synagogue. And one of the reasons I can remember it is because, like, the way that Zeffirelli did it, it's got the guy's frothing at the mouth. There's like all frothing at the mouth going on, and I'm going like, I'm 10 years old, and go, it pulled me in, it drew me in, So I think probably that predates any of my actual reading of the texts. So for me, like, the first encounter with the biblical text, my first encounter with the Jesus tradition was seeing Zeffirelli. And not long after that, it was also King of Kings and Greatest Story Ever Told, because I watched those on TV as well. So, I mean, like, and I think I'm not unusual in that. All right, no. I'm unusual in the sense that I ended up like making a career, and that's unusual.
Yeah.
But I'm not unusual, and that was the first encounter. That's so, and that's why I do go back to those things, because I think they're highly relevant to how you actually encounter the biblical text.
Yeah, and not just Jesus movies, but biblical epics in general. Like
exactly,
like I said, Ten Commandments, Samson, Story of Ruth, and
totally Samson and Delilah. Oh my goodness! Like, I was traumatized by the bloody thing where the gouges eyes out. I was like, I can remember talking to my mum and dad about, I can't cope with that. Yeah.
It was a lot more brutal than that.
Yeah. I'm just like kind of, I mean, like, there's no way that they were showing you this stuff if it was like when you were like 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, if it wasn't from the Bible. But because it's from the Bible, they'll let you watch the thing, and I'm going, I'm really upset. This guy's eyes, gouged out, So no, but absolutely, Samson and Delilah. Shoot, that was again mega for me.
And where they in the Story of Ruth, where they try to show one part of her past which isn't really in the Bible, and then they show the rest of it from there.
Yeah. And there's still, honestly, I still want someone to do a really, really good film of the Ruth story. Do you know a good film of the Ruth story?
I don't think I've seen except the one from 1960, but there's a good one of Esther called One Night in the King.
That's true. But I still think you could create a gorgeous story about the Ruth story. I really do.
And about David, we haven't really seen I haven't really seen an impressive one about David that really stuck to me.
That's right. Same. Because to do a really good film, you've got to get you need sympathetic characters. You've got to have the 3-dimensional characters, and they've just never quite got that right. I mean, overall, this is what I think for people like me and like you that are fascinated with Bible films, the whole problem is that we're aware of the fact that the majority of them are not great. They really are not great. And they should be, because the source material is so fantastic, right?
Yeah.
So every now and then you'll get a moment or a film and you go, that's it. But it's very rare it's a whole film. Like for me, it's more like it's vignettes. It's like little bits, where I go, that's great. But it's usually little bits. For me, at least, that's how I respond to the whole genre.
Yeah, I really like One Night with the King, but we haven't really seen really epic ones of most of the prophets. Like I really wanted to see one about Elijah.
Yeah, same.
That has a lot of potential.
Wouldn't that be great? Exactly. Yeah. That wouldn't. Why has that not happened?
I don't know.
The narrative's there. The narrative's right there. Do it. The narrative's there. I know it's frustrating. It's frustrating.
I believe a Bible story that would be like you could flesh it out and be funny, but it would also have to be like R-rated. Would be the story of King Solomon.
Yeah.
Well, they actually do have one an Iranian one where he's warding off demons, but that's more of Islamic tradition.
Well, I haven't seen that yet.
Well, I mean, could you imagine like they do like a story about King Solomon, but they like include like the songs of Solomon?
Yeah, where he's describing his sexual escapades.
It might. I mean, and there again is your whole problem, because anytime that you do anything related to the Bible, you've always got the problem that the church or the churches are going to go yay or nay. That's the problem.
And that was an issue with the Last Temptation of Christ. Like you can understand why people back then lost their shit about it, because it shows certain scenes, unorthodox scenes, but the whole point of it was that was a vision when he had on the cross, the Last Temptation.
Yeah.
And it says at the beginning that it's a work of fiction. It's not based on the Gospels, but they didn't get that memo.
Personally, don't have a problem with it at all, but I remember so when that came out in, what was it, 87, 88, round about that time? It was 88, was it? Thanks.
Yeah.
I was just coming to the end of my undergrad and going to grad study in Oxford, and I had a bunch of people that I knew that were actually going to picket the film and like tell people not to come in, like not to go. I said, like, have you seen it? And they were like, no, but it sounds awful. And I was like, well, shouldn't you see it first? And they were like, well, we don't want to give money to, well, hold on a minute. Like, you can't go and like picket the thing until you've seen it. To be fair, though, having seen it, I understand why. I'm not going to be stupid about it. I understand what I get it. I personally think it's sort of flawed genius, The Last Temptation. I think that the way that I would do it, like, so when I teach it in my Jesus course, they all go back and they all go and watch it. But then when we get together to talk about it, I think we almost always agree that there are moments of really, they're really sublime, that really kind of, that you just think, that's it. I mean, one obvious example is the temptation itself on the cross. There's the moment where you get, so you've got this beautiful score from Peter Gabriel. I mean, like, I mean, like when I run the, I mean, like, I'm a very lucky person. So when I teach my course on Jesus in film, I actually run, as people are coming into the class, certain bits of the soundtrack of the film we're going to watch. And when we do Last Temptation, I actually run some of the Peter Gabriel score.
Yeah, I love that. I love that soundtrack.
There's no way you can't love it. There's just no way. It's just it's a thing of great beauty. And the scene with when it's well weird, but when he's like doing the domestic bliss with Mary and Martha,
yeah,
it's kind of I'm sorry, it's just like a beautiful piece of film. It
like
really
the music,
is.
like the music just gets better. Like after the after
it
you know
really does, doesn't it?
after he dies on the cross, he leaves that dreary world behind, and he gets into the vision of this other idealized world, which kind of looks like medieval England for some reason. But then the music just starts getting better and better and better.
I mean, like I mean, and to me, I mean, film is complicated. You can absolutely hate a film but love its soundtrack. But but with the thing with Last Temptation, I don't hate it at all. Just don't get me wrong. I think it's a strange film. I think there's lots of problems with it. But equally, there are moments that reduce me to tears. So on some level, it's done its visceral. It's done its work. And I don't think it would work without the Peter Gabriel. I really don't. I really don't. I mean, like I have listened to pieces of that soundtrack in isolation, and every single time I listen to them, I get moved to tears. So.
And another thing about there's also a Life of Brian, which divided people.
Yeah.
I never really cared for it. Like it's perhaps you can enlighten us since you're British.
I adore Life of Brian. And the music's great because it's Howard Goodall doing it, and like he's actually imitating a lot of the music from King. It's more like King of Kings than it is like Jesus of Nazareth, even though in other respects it looks more like Jesus of Nazareth because it's like filmed in the same places as it was. But no, I mean, like, it may be just because I'm British and but I still think it is the funniest thing ever. I just love it.
There's only like one part that that made me laugh out loud was them stoning the stoning scene.
I love. Okay, that's my favorite scene. Okay, so we're friends. We're friends. Yeah. The idea that they're actually paying money. They're paying money to get the stones ready to, and then of course this absolutely ludicrous idea. You've got men pretending to be women, pretending to be men. That, I'm sorry, that's genius. I like the idea that we know full well male actors who are pretending to be women who are pretending to be men. I'm sorry, I just think that's genius. It's absolutely fantastic.
It's just like, screw it, I'm gonna die anyway. He's like, Jehovah, Jehovah, Jehovah.
Genius. Yeah. It's just a bit of halibut, isn't it? I'm sorry, I think it's great.
Yeah, but
a lot of people hate it.
But what bothered me was about the crucifixion. Like, I know it's supposed to be like it's supposed to be satirical, but look on the bright side of life. But it's just sort of denigrates the way like thousands of people died in most excruciating way imaginable.
I do actually 100% get what you're saying there. And when I first saw it, it was like 1979, and I was like 12 years old. I actually was quite upset by the crucifixion stuff, to be fair. Yeah. And I think there's something about that. I found that it's one of those hard things. Like, you have to remember, it's so hard with film. If you can remember how you first reacted to it, it's quite important to do that. And when I first reacted to it, I reacted negatively. I would say over the years, because I've become numbed to it, because loads of my colleagues really love it, I've got that as a thing. So no, I get what you're saying. I think that's a really fair point. It's a really fair point.
Yeah, but it's also like then there's, at least with the Jesus story, what he's gonna live and he's gonna rise again, but it's going through that. And there's
which they don't even like kind of allude to, do they? Really?
Yeah, like compared to outright tragic stories like in Spartacus, where he's just like he went on this fight for freedom and he just dies for nothing.
Yeah. But I suppose the other side of it is, one of the things that I do think is like hysterical is if you've seen Spartacus and you've got like, I'm Spartacus, no, I'm Spartacus, and then you get in Life of Brian, like, I'm Brian and so's my wife. I do now find that really funny, but it's interesting what you say, because as a young person watching it, and as a like kind of quite pious Christian at the time, I did actually struggle with it. I'll be fair, and I think it's very important not to be too, kind of glib about these things. I actually think that a lot of Christians that struggled with the crucifixion scene, even though I must admit now, because I'm probably some hardened, knackered, skeptical, kind of religious studies scholar, but I can actually remember what it was like. I can remember what it was like finding it upsetting. So I actually, when I teach it, I actually do ask my students, how do you feel about that? Like, did anyone, and for some of them, they might find it triggering, Mostly though, by the way, just for what it's worth, most of my students really struggle with Life of Brian, not for any other reason than that they just don't connect with the humor. They just don't connect with it at all. It's, to them, it's really passe, and they just don't love it. They to them it just feel the film seems silly. The film is silly, and they just don't think it's funny, And like I'm the generation, like I'm in my 50s, like, so but a lot of my students, they just don't connect with it. So
I mean, compared to what we had recently, like there was one we shall not talk about, but you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That one, yeah.
Yeah.
So compared to that, doesn't seem so bad like nowadays.
No, and it feels like a long time ago as well. So, time like changes these things. But no, it's like, I mean, I think it's very important with all of these things is you have to acknowledge people's reactions to these things as their own authentic reactions. You can't. I really don't like it when some of my colleagues say, you should find this funny. You should. No. Maybe you just don't. So no, I 100% get that. And I always remember when I first saw it, I had a problem with it. All right, I was 12 years old, but I had a problem with it, so I understand that.
And there's another interesting aspect of getting into Christ figures in other forms of media.
Mm-hmm.
Like Frodo, Gandalf, Aragorn, and Harry Potter, and Aslan and Neo, who are both supposed to be representations of the second coming of Christ.
Right.
Hey, did you hear me? Codes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were given that list, and I just said, "Oh, and Donald Trump."
He's the Antichrist.
I had to make that joke because
this is not a political podcast, right?
We talk about politics, but
I just had to do that because it was just too easy of a joke to do.
No, he's a satanic figure.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's great. No, it's like
he makes Barack Obama look like a saint in comparison.
Exactly.
I just thought it was just. I had to do that because that was just too easy of a joke to do when you were giving all those lists.
That just makes my skin crawl.
Yeah. Same here.
But I mean, I remember what was funny also, I was thinking about it, it was when you brought up how, like, in a crucifixion scene where they were saying, like, look on the bright side of life.
Mm-hmm.
And that reminded me, I believe, of that Monty Python skit where they had, like, the crucifixion, where the song was literally, look on the bright side of life.
Yeah.
And I thought that made me laugh too, because that's what I was thinking about.
No, first time I saw it, I was like, "This is fucking stupid," and then over time, I was just like, I'm more desensitized to it now. I'm like,
when I first saw it, I was worse. I didn't think it was stupid. I thought it was offensive. When I first saw it, I was 12 years old, and it's like maybe I've often thought like that reaction. So I've always held on to that because I know that that's how some other people respond to it, and it's one of those things. I think the same thing's true of Last Temptation of the Christ. Like people's response, if they really, I mean, like, there's the people that refuse to even watch it. Well, fine, like you can't really have a conversation with them. But if they've watched it and they've really, really hated it, I actually don't think we should like belittle it and say, well, the authentic response is you should do this. No. Let's talk to them about like their problems with it. And that's what I'm like, because like film is visceral. Like if you look at the responses to Passion of the Christ totally and completely divided people. You've got people that absolutely hated that film, really loathed it. And like I would say, like I think maybe it was the second or the third time I went to see it. I was doing a panel in Wolverhampton in England, and I was like up to go and like talk about it. But they screened it beforehand, and the person sitting next to me was one of the people that was going to be on the panel. And as it turned out, she hated it, hated it, And I don't love the film. Don't go. But I find it incredibly emotional. I was sitting next to her, and I was sitting there, and I was sobbing. I do every time I watch the film. I actually find it incredibly moving. I'm not especially proud of the fact that that's how it affects me, because I know there's problems with it. I don't like its attitude to Judaism. I'm sorry, I watch it. I cry every time I watch it, every single time without fail. And it made it really, really, really hard when I sat with her on the panel afterwards and a couple of other people, and actually had to sort of like talk about the problems with the film, because like she knew full well. I was sitting there sobbing, literally. I was like crying, like to the point where she could hear me. I mean, it's awful. I'm not especially proud of that, but that's just how it is, because that's like how film is. Film affects you. Like it doesn't matter. I can do all the intellectual stuff, and it still affects me there, right? Like, kind of, or there, maybe, I don't know, it's difficult.
Yeah, and even video games do that.
Yeah, of course they do.
Yeah, like I can't, like, I played Okami numerous times, like, when I just can't get past the end without bawling my eyes out.
No, of course. And I think, and to that extent, it's been successful, because in a sense, that's what it's trying to do. And it's one of the things I found really, really difficult in trying to sort of like convey to colleagues is that sometimes the visceral response, the emotional response, is the real one. It's like the first one. You can then go in and say, this is problematic, this is problematic, this is problematic. But you can't take away from the fact, and if I sat down and watched it now, I would still sob. I'm sorry, I would. I mean, I just would, because I think it's like, on the emotional level, I think it's brilliantly achieved as a way of like kind of like engaging the emotions. Maybe that's its problem. Maybe that's its problem. I don't know, but
another along with Last Temptation of Christ, I like the psychological stuff. Like there's one, I forgot what it was called, but it's about Jesus' last temptation in his temptation in the desert, where Lucifer appears to him, but he he is himself. He's his mirror. Like he takes the form of Jesus, so they're both two Jesuses talking to each other.
Yeah, that's not the Ewan McGregor, not the Ewan McGregor.
Yeah, that one.
Called? Yeah, what's that? What the hell's that called? I can't remember. But yeah, another one. I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
might have been in the desert or Jesus in the desert.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's like a desert. Yeah, it's like set in the kind of temptation thing. Yeah.
And he comes across this family and wonders how his own thing is like, and the way when the devil describes Jesus asks him what God's really like, since he's not really fully divine yet until the transfiguration.
Yeah.
But then is there a face? Like, no, there's no face.
Mm-hmm.
Like they acknowledge that God is not some man in the sky, which is I've always found stupid. It's just
yeah. No, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. I don't know about you, but I'm far more likely to get really emotional over film than I am over text. Occasionally you read some text and it like hits you, but usually film confronts you in a different way, and that's why personally I love the study of Jesus films. And I think the other thing I would always say is that I don't know about you, but I don't have the best imagination. So in other words, I can read the Gospels and I struggle to see it. So if I can go and watch a Jesus film, even if it's anachronistic, it's problematic, it still helps me to visualize the text. And that's one of the reasons I go to it, because it helps me to visualize the text. And even if I look at it and I go, that's wrong, and that's wrong, I'm still looking at it and thinking, but okay, that helps. I'll give you a concrete example. Jesus of Nazareth. When you get in Jesus of Nazareth, the scene where the paralyzed man lets him, his four mates let him down through the roof. I watched that and I thought, okay, I can see it. Because like the way they did the house was like basically like a first century Palestinian house, Galilean house would have looked like. And ever since then, I look at it and I think, yeah, that'll do. I can see it. Do you know what I mean? So that's one of the things I love about the Jesus films, is that it helps my limited imagination to come alive with something real, like something like, oh, maybe that incident never happened. I don't care. The point is, the story the Gospels tell is depicted in a way that helps me to imagine it. And that's an important contribution to the historical imagination, because history is often about imagination,
Yeah. And I haven't really gotten to The Chosen. I haven't really seen it, but I've heard good things about it.
I've only done season 1. I actually, in spite of myself, I kind of loved it. Like the parts like there's all sorts of bits that I didn't like, but basically I kind of loved it. I think what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to at some point I'm going to like watch it all and podcast on it, But I do think there's a reason why people love it, because it actually does bring the Gospels to life. So I'm not going to criticize it. And I've had a couple of students that just adore it. They just absolutely adore it. A couple of people that did my Jesus and film class last time I taught it, a year or so ago, they did it specifically because they'd watched The Chosen and they wanted to like see what other examples of in Jesus and film was like.
And I heard there about these scenes where disciples are following them and they're writing their own gospel accounts. Like, it didn't happen that way.
No, that's all the stuff I struggle with. I struggle with that so much. So, and also, although I'm only done season 1, I'm reliably informed that they're back to the whole Mary Magdalene as a sex worker thing, and I hate that trope so much. And like, I'm stressed about the fact they're going to do that. But and also, even in season 1, there's so many anachronisms. But hey ho, I mean, like, I just wish that they got like, it's not too difficult. Just find a nice, I'd have done it for them, but I mean, like, never mind me. Like, find a historical consultant that can say, don't do that, do this, do that. Because like people like me, we're obsessed with this stuff. We spend all our lives looking at it.
What would be a really good historical consultant? Metatron.
Well, I've done it a few times, and actually, there's been a few times where I've said, please don't do this. I mean, like, I'll give you an example. The History Channel series, The Bible, when Jesus was crucified, they actually, I so regret this, but they put the titulus above the cross in the show, and it was like gobbledygook. It was like Greek, Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, Aramaic, Latin, and it was gobbledygook. It was full of grammatical errors. And the thing is, like, the point is, I'd seen the script, but in the script it didn't have that. What they'd done was, like, the script was approved. They then go out to Morocco. It's always Morocco. They film the thing.
Of course, it had to be Morocco.
It's always Morocco. They film the thing. You've got the titulus up there, and they've basically got some props guy to do the titulus on the cross, and it's full of grammatical errors. And like, so I then see the rushes from Morocco, and I said, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to, in the nicest possible way, I said, like, it wasn't, gobbledygook's a bit strong, I'm being unfair, but there were like 4 or 5 really basic grammatical errors. And they said to me, okay, we're looking into see if we can like digitally alter it. They were like literally looking at doing the CGI to alter it. They decided it was going to be so expensive to do that. And instead of doing that, they just didn't do any close-ups that had the titulus on it, which I was kind of okay with it. And actually, when it came out, I looked at it and I actually freeze framed it, and I looked at it and I could still see the grammatical mistake. It's fine. But all I'm saying is, consultants actually like me that actually know the stuff. I mean, look, we might be nerds, but at least actually you're going to give it some degree of historical accuracy. And it so annoys me that with something like The Chosen, which is like beautifully written, well acted, and people love it, don't like throw in all these stupid anachronisms which you don't need. You really do. I mean, like, look when they, I mean, I've only done season 1, but when they sit around and have a meal, like they're having a meal, like, if I go down the road to my friend Jill's house, and we have, because I go every year and we did the Seder with them, it looked exactly like it is at their house, except they've tried to dress it in like first century, stuff. And it didn't look like that. They didn't have like a Seder or sitting up on a seat like this with one space for Elijah. And it's so annoying because it takes you out of, or it takes me out of the narrative. But
yeah, that's one anachronism that really jumped out at me when watching The Last Supper from 2012.
Yeah,
it's during the Last Supper, and they talk about their interactions with him, and Jesus suspects who's actually betraying him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But
it's played by the one that played in the Gospel of Matthew from the 90s.
Right. Yeah. No, and so, but
anyway, I was talking about the anachronism that jumped out at you. The way the table's set up, it's like the Renaissance painting of Da Vinci, even though they probably sat on a carpet.
And that's the thing, because that's what's in the cultural memory. That's why they want to do that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when in reality they're just sitting on rugs, pillows, probably.
Of course. And it's like, even if you didn't know that from the archaeology and from the ancient text, even there in the text of John's Gospel, it says that the beloved disciple was leaning on Jesus's lap. And they're all saying, they all use the word reclining. They always use that word. And reclining does not mean sitting like I'm sitting now upright in this seat. It just doesn't. They just didn't do that. It's just like, it's so anachronistic. And it's such a shame because, like, I actually think they would actually probably be happier to have depicted it accurately than to have depicted it inaccurately. But you know, that's just life. That's just how it is, and that's like kind of like 9 out of 10 Jesus films, unfortunately.
Well, we're 40 minutes past our usual time, but we had to talk about this.
Sorry, yeah, absolutely. We should cut it up. I've really enjoyed the chat. It's been fun.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had a lot of fun too, but can you tell the audience about any projects that you're working on?
Well, I'd be delighted to. So the main thing I want to talk about, even though it's on a bit of a hiatus at the moment, I have a podcast called the NT Pod, and you can find it at podacre.blogspot.com. And you can also go to YouTube and just look for Podacre, Podacre. It's my name, Goodacre, but with the pod bit on it. And that's one of the things that I really want to kind of like work a bit more in the future. At the moment, it's on hiatus because I'm desperately trying to finish a book on John's Gospel. Like, I just hope that it's going to see the light of one of these days, you know. But otherwise, yeah, that's I would love it. Please go and see podacre.blogspot.com or Podacre on YouTube. And otherwise, yeah, that's where we are.
All right.
Okay.
Can you tell
check. What was that?
Can you tell the audience where they can find you?
Well, the easiest way, sorry, it's to me. The easiest way to find me is Mark Goodacre, my name, M-A-R-K Goodacre, GOODACRE.org, markgoodacre.org. Oh, damn it. Just like Google Mark Goodacre. Luckily, I'm not called John Smith. So, you know, you can find me on the way. It's easy to find me, you know. And if I'm not talking about Doctor Who or ABBA, I'm talking about the New Testament. So, you know, if you're not interested in Doctor Who or ABBA, there's the New Testament. If not interested in any of those, then just don't bother.
All right. This is Purple Pill Philosophy signing off.
All right.
Cheers.